An international multi-million-pound chop shop, organised crime gang, had luxury cars often stolen during terrifying robberies or burglaries shipped to Dubai. High-end luxury Range Rovers, Mercedes and Porches were stolen to order before being sent to the Middle East or stripped for parts. The Oldham-based gang behind the staggering plot, who called themselves the Company, are thought to have links to organised crime in the Middle East. While praising the work of investigating officers, a judge demanded that the case be investigated by Greater Manchester Police Chief Constable after claiming some of the gang were allowed to commit crime with impunity after being released under investigation. Come to that in a moment. So a total of 11 shipping containers were shipped to the Middle East during a 12-month period. Of those containers, 3 were recovered, which all contained stolen Range Rovers and stolen parts. The gang operated chop shops at Old Mills in Bury and Oldham, as well as a unit in Wigan, where stolen cars were stripped down. The terror of victims who had their cars stolen, often as they slept in the middle of the night, was laid bare as 5 members of the gang were jailed for almost 50 years. One man at his home in Failsworth with his 3-year-old daughter was told he would be killed if he went out to investigate, as thieves stole his Mercedes. Another man was robbed of his car in broad daylight by masked men, while another was at home with his family when masked men, one armed with a hammer, broke into his home. The gang leader, Azif Hussain, who posed as a successful businessman and lived in a large detached house in Stockport, was jailed for 15 years, while other senior members of the organised crime gang also faced justice. Hussain and others responsible for the conspiracy to steal and export cars were prosecuted, but the robbers and burglars have not been caught. Judge Anthony Cross QC said senior members of the gang were well aware of how the cars came into their possession. This was a professional operation led by career criminals who were motivated by profit and greed, and who cared for not one moment how the expensive vehicles came into their possession. Hadir Ali was jailed for 11 years. Sadid Jangaria was jailed for 10 years. Tayyub Hasnan was jailed for 5 years and 6 months, and Ibraz Shafiq was sentenced to 5 years. The conspirators discussed their crimes on a WhatsApp group named The Company. The painstaking police investigation revealed that the gang targeted high-value vehicles, and once stolen, either stripped them for parts or exported them to the Middle East. Cars were stolen with the help of high-tech gadgets, including portable frequency jammers, allowing keyless entry to Range Rovers in particular. One shipping container containing stolen Range Rovers and parts destined for Dubai was stopped at Seaforth Dock in Merseyside before it could leave. Another was recovered in Istanbul, while another container sent to Sharjah in the United Arab Emirates was returned unopened. Police uncovered the first chop shop after a car hire company became suspicious. An Audi had been loaned out, but the dealership in Oldham was told the car could not be returned in time as it was in London. Suspicions arose, and the dealership used the car's GPS system and discovered it was actually in Chadderton, which is in the northwest. Police attended the unit and found stolen cars and parts. Undeterred, the gang then moved to a unit behind a quick-fit garage in Wigan. Later, police found the engine and gearbox for a Range Rover which had been stolen from a house in London, and an engine and gearbox from a Porsche stolen in Bolton. Officers then discovered another chop shop at Vale Mill in Chadderton, a former textiles mill. It was uncovered after a man was robbed of his Audi in Oldham. The car's tracking software led the police to the mill. The gang then took on a unit at Pioneer Mill in Radcliffe, where further parts of stolen vehicles were found. Judge Cross told the gang's ringleader Hussain, who ran a car garage and sales business, "Your greed knew no bounds. You knew where the vehicles were coming from and how, yet you took them. Not content with selling them to domestic market, you formed a new conspiracy and shipped them abroad." He said Jangaira was at the heart of the gang and was directly implicated in at least 27 thefts of vehicles. He was also the co-founder of the organised crime group and the named tenant of 2 chop shops. Judge Cross said he would be asking the Greater Manchester Police Chief Constable Stephen Watson to investigate after some of the members of the gang were arrested but later released under investigation. Judge Cross said he would be asking the Greater Manchester Police's Chief Constable to investigate after some members of the gang were arrested but later released under investigation. He said on a number of occasions defendants in this case with bad records were released under investigation. It appears yet again police officers failed to make the appropriate and obvious inquiries about the men they had arrested. Had those checks been made and detained in custody, then perhaps some of the victims would have been spared the terrible trauma that befell them. That some of these experienced criminals were allowed to commit further crime, it seems, with impunity is of some considerable concern. So Haider Ali pleaded guilty to conspiracy to handle stolen goods and conspiracy to export. The same for Sajid Jangaria. Ibra Shafiq pleaded guilty to conspiracy to handle stolen goods and conspiracy to commit fraud. Asif Hussain pleaded guilty to conspiracy to steal, conspiracy to handle stolen goods, conspiracy to export and fraud. Tayyab Hussain pleaded guilty to conspiracy to steal and conspiracy to handle stolen goods. He was jailed for 5 years and 6 months. There was another man, Mohammed Abdullah. He got a 2-year suspended sentence after admitting conspiracy to handle stolen goods. Now, the judge also demanded an investigation because 2 members of that organised crime gang were able to successfully apply for a £145,000 COVID bounce back loan. Asif Hussain, the ringleader of the chop shop ring, was able to secure £50,000 in funding offered by the government to help businesses struggling during the pandemic. And another gang member, Ibra Shafiq, was first able to get £50,000 and then another £45,000. But the maximum loan available was £50,000. Both men had previous criminal convictions. A judge said the most basic of checks would have revealed the fraud and demanded an explanation from the authorities within 2 weeks. He said it defies belief that Hussain, who has 48 previous offences on his record and was previously jailed for 4 years for drug dealing, was given funding. The judge said that the abuse of the system by Hussain and Shafiq demonstrated moral depravity of the highest order. He said at a time when genuine businesses were being devastated by the pandemic, you that are concerned with that aspect of this case showed your utter contempt for others. As I said, Hussain was jailed for 15 years while Shafiq was locked up for 5. So prosecutors said that the actual firm where Hussain was the director of German Automotive 365 never submitted a tax return, and there were no records of the company being registered for VAT. The company received a £50,000 payment a week after making an application. Shafiq, a director of Merck Car Breakers, set up a Lloyd's bank account a month after being made a director. He also received a £50,000 loan. And a few months later, Shafiq received a second loan, this time for £45,000 after opening another bank account for his work as a sole trader in computing. It is believed just 5 days after opening the bank account, he then received a loan, and he then transferred the sum from his Merck Car Breakers bank account and sent the majority to his personal account. Guys, that's a news story coming from the Northwest where a gang from Oldham ran a £3 million international chop shop, and they shipped over Range Rovers, Mercedes and Porches, often stolen in terrifying robberies, to Dubai, and the 5 men have been jailed for almost 50 years. Let me know what you guys think. It's your boy GC. Keep it locked, keep it real.